Hello. Hey. So let me tell you about my Muldrotha the Gravetide Rats deck. Yes, I said a Muldrotha Rats deck. I wanted to build something fun. So Muldrotha the Gravetide, well, what do they do? During each of your turns, you may play up to one permanent card of each permanent type from your graveyard. What's cool about this is that your graveyard turns into your hand once Muldrotha is out on the battlefield. So, hooray! All right, let's start with the lands. I have two islands, two forests, 11 swamps, Arch of Oraska. Once you have the city's blessing, if you have 10 or more permanents on the battlefield on your side, you can tap 5 lands and then tap this card to draw a card. So there's some card draw. Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. Each land is a swamp in addition to its other land types, which is cool because most of my creatures and spells are black, so it helps with that. Swarmyard. This is great because it taps for a mana, and you can tap it and target insect, rat, spider, or squirrel can be regenerated or regenerate target. Yeah, so it keeps something from not dying, so that's cool. Memorial to Genius. It can tap for a blue, and then you can also pay for a blue and tap this to draw 2 cards. So more card draw. Bojuka Bog. It enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, exile all cards from target player's graveyard, and it taps for 1 black mana. Memorial to Folly. Can tap for a mana or black mana, and then you can also pay 2 a black and tap it to return target card from your graveyard. So here's some more graveyard recursion. Witch's Cottage. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 3 or more swamps. And if it enters the battlefield untapped, I can return a creature card from my graveyard to the top of my library. Ghost Quarter. You can tap for a generic mana, and I can tap it, sacrifice it, and destroy target land in case my opponents have some kind of sneaky, tricky, fancy spancy land. I can be like, nah. Mm-hmm. But if I do destroy one of the lands, they get to search for a basic land card and put it into the battlefield, and then shuffle their library. Field of Ruins, pretty much the same as Ghost Quarter, except I have to pay 2 and sacrifice it to destroy a non-basic land an opponent controls. And then each player searches his or her library for a basic land card, and then puts it into the battlefield, and then shuffles their library. Hooray! You and your fancy lands. Sunken Hollow enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more basic lands. So hopefully I have 2 or more basic lands on the battlefield. But this one, Drowned Catacomb, it enters the battlefield tapped unless you control an island or a swamp. This one would actually help with Drowned Catacomb. Choked Estuary. Choked Estuary? Yes, I know words. As it enters the battlefield, you may reveal an island or swamp from your hand. If you don't, it enters tapped. Golgari Guildgate. It can tap for a black or a green, and it comes into the battlefield tapped. Woodland Cemetery. Enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a swamp or a forest. And then you can play it for a black or a green. Overgrown Tomb. It's a swamp forest, and it says, as it enters the battlefield, you may pay 2 life. If you don't, it enters the battlefield tapped. Blooming Marsh. Enters the battlefield unless you control 2 or fewer lands. Simic Guildgate comes in tapped. That's okay. And then Path of Ancestry comes into the battlefield tapped. And then I can tap it, add to your mana pool 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. When that mana is spent to cast a creature spell that shares the creature's type of your commander, scry 1. That will never happen in this deck. Or, yeah. Gateway Plaza enters the battlefield tapped. And when it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you pay 1. And then you can tap it to add mana of any color. Command Tower. I can tap it to add any color of your commander's color identity. Yay, and those are the 35 lands. And now for the rats part of the rats deck, Relentless Rats. It's a 1 generic and 2 black. Relentless Rats gets +1/+1 for each other creature on the battlefield named Relentless Rats. A deck can have any number of cards named Relentless Rats. So basically, so you have 2 rats on the battlefield. They would give each other an additional +1/+1 for the other one, not counting itself. So if there were 2 on the battlefield, they would be a 3/3 instead of a 2/2. And then if another one came in, it would be a 4/4. Wait, yeah, math is hard. Yes, math. But anyway, there are 25 Relentless Rats in the deck. Piper of the Swarm, 1 generic and a black. It says that rats you control have menace. So menace is when you attack with a creature, your opponent has to block with 2 or more creatures. You can also pay a generic black and tap it and create a 1/1 black creature token. Or you can pay 2 generic, 2 black, tap it, sacrifice 3 rats, and then gain control of target creature. So that's a nice way to steal your opponent's creatures or their commanders. Ogre Slumlord. For 3 generic and 2 black, it reads, whenever another non-token creature dies, you may put a 1/1 black rat creature token onto the battlefield. So that's when any creature dies. And we have some ways to kill our opponent's creatures in this deck, and I'll show you in a minute. It also says, rats you control have Death Touch. So that's a good way to kill them all. Ratcatcher. For 4 generic and 2 black, it has Fear. This creature can't be blocked except by artifact creatures or black creatures. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you may search your library for a rat card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. This is a nice way to go find more rats. Here are some ways to kill our opponent's creatures. Ravenous Chupacabra. 2 generic and 2 black. And then when it enters the battlefield, destroy target creature and opponent controls. Yeah. And with Muldrotha, you can keep playing it from the battlefield and killing their creatures. And Acidic Slime. 3 generic, 2 green. It has Death Touch. And when it enters the battlefield, I can destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. Yeehaw. Spore Frog for 1 green. You can sacrifice it and prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. So it's like it's a good fog effect. Eternal Witness. When it enters the battlefield, you may return target card from your graveyard to your hand for a generic and 2 green. Hey, there you go. Reclamation Sage. For 2 generic and a green, it says, when it enters the battlefield, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment. So, no toys for you, more for me. Plaguecrafter. For 2 generic and a black, when it enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. Each player who can't discards a card. Muldrotha has flying, and when Muldrotha enters the battlefield, draw 2 cards. Or you can play it for its invoke cost. When you play it for its invoke cost, you have to sacrifice it when it enters the battlefield, but you still get the trigger, so you still get to draw 2 cards. And with Muldrotha, you can keep playing it from the battlefield for 2 generic and a blue to keep drawing cards. So that's nifty. Solemn simulacrum, sure. Also known as a sad robot. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic card. Put that card into your battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. When it dies, you get to draw a card for 4 generic. And for 1 and a green, Sakura Tribe Elder. In this one, you can sacrifice it. Once you do that, you get to search your library for a basic card, put that card into play tapped, then shuffle your library. And all these cards are like the mana ramp cards that I have in my deck. Spring Bloom Druid. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice a land. If you do, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards. Put them into the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Again, with Muldrotha, you can also play lands from your graveyard. So sacrificing a land isn't a big deal. Fleshbag Marauder. When it enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature. So this works well with that other card that makes rat tokens. Burnished Heart for 3 generic. I can pay 3, sacrifice it, search my library for up to 2 basic land cards, and then put it into the battlefield tapped. Then shuffle your library. And those are the creatures. Now on to the artifacts. Thrumming Stone for 5 mana. It says spells you control have Ripple 4. And what that means is whenever you play a spell, you may reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may play any revealed cards with the same name as a spell without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom of your library. So this one's good because I have so many Relentless Rats. After I play a Relentless Rats, I can reveal the top 4 cards of my library and play for free any additional Relentless Rats. Caged Sun. As it enters the battlefield, choose a color. Black is usually what I go with. Creatures of the chosen color get +1/+1. So all my rats get an additional +1/+1. And whenever a land's ability adds 1 or more mana of the chosen color to your mana pool, add an additional mana of that chosen color. Gilded Lotus. It's a 5-drop, and I get to tap it and add 3 mana of any color to my mana pool. Akroma's Memorial. Creatures you control have flying, first strike, vigilance, trample, haste, protection from black, and protection from red. For 7 mana. Only 7 mana? What a steal for all that. Herald's Horn for 3. When it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. I'm going to go with rats. And then creature spells you cast of the chosen type cost 1 less to cast. And at the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. If it's a creature card of the chosen type, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. So it's kind of like it does a couple things. It reduces the cost, and it kind of sometimes sort of draws me an additional card each turn. And everyone's favorite, Soul Ring. For 1 generic, tap it, add 2 to your mana pool. 2 generic. The Immortal Sun. For 6. Players can't activate Planeswalker's loyalty abilities. And at the beginning of your draw step, draw an additional card. Yay, because drawing cards is fun. And spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And creatures you control get +1/+1. So lots of fun stuff on this one. Crucible of Worlds. If you don't have Muldrotha on the battlefield, you can use this to play land cards from your graveyard. Chromatic Lantern. for 3 generic. Lands you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Vanquisher's Banner for 5. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. I'm going to go with the rats again. Creatures you control of the chosen type get a +1/+1, and whenever you cast creature spells of the chosen type, draw a card. And now for the enchantments. Secrets of the Dead. Whenever you cast a spell from your graveyard, draw a card, which works pretty well, which works really well with Muldrotha when it's on the battlefield. Monastery Siege. It's an enchantment for two and a blue. And as it enters the battlefield, choose cons or dragons. If you choose cons, at the beginning of your draw step, draw an additional card and discard a card. And dragons, which I will never pick in this deck, says spells your opponents cast that target you or a permanent you control cost 2 or more to cast. Journey to Eternity. For 1, a black and a green, it's a legendary enchantment aura. So you attach this to a creature. And when that creature dies, return it to the battlefield under your control. Then return Journey to Eternity to the battlefield transformed under your control. And when you flip it, it becomes I'm not going to try that. Cave of Eternity. It's a legendary land. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Or you can pay 3, a green and a black, tap it to return creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's another way to get your stuff back. Revel in Riches. This is an alternative win condition. For 4 and a black, it reads, whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, create a colorless treasure artifact token with, you can tap that artifact, sacrifice it, then add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. It also says, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasures, you win the game. So that's another way to win the game instead of just attacking. Zendikar Resurgent. For 5 and 2 green, whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana to your mana pool. Of any type that mana would produce. So essentially it doubles your mana. And whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. For 4 and 2 blues, and it reads enchant permanent. And then you control enchanted permanent. Enchanted permanent is legendary. So you can just pretty much pick anything that your opponents have and take control of it. Grave Betrayal. For 5 and 2 black, whenever a creature you don't control dies, return it to the battlefield under your control with an additional +1/+1 counter on it at the beginning of the next end step. That creature is a black zombie in addition to its other color types. So here's another way to steal your opponent's creatures. Whip of Erebos for 2 and 2 black. Creatures you control have lifelink. Because what's the second best thing in Magic besides drawing cards? Gaining life. Yay. And you can also pay 2 and 2 black, tap it, and return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste, exile it at the beginning of the next end step. And now we're on to the sorceries. Patriarchs Bidding for 3 and 2 black. It says, each player chooses a creature type. Each player returns all creature cards of the type chosen this way from his or her graveyard to play. So as long as other people aren't playing tribal decks, you're good to go. You can return all your rats with this card onto the battlefield. In Garrick's Wake, for 7 and 2 black, destroy all creatures you don't control and all planeswalkers you don't control. So some mass destruction right there. Here's another potential win condition for X and 2 black. Repeat the following process X times. Each opponent loses 3 life unless that player sacrifices a non-land permanent or discards a card. So towards the end of the game, when you have a bunch of mana, you can, if you get this, you can play it and hopefully win. Hopefully, maybe. Kindred Dominance. For 5 and 2 black. Choose a creature type. And then destroy all creatures that aren't of the chosen type. So kill everything but the rats. For instance, only have 2. Unwind for 2 and a blue to counter a non-creature spell, and then after that, I can untap up to 3 lands. And I also have Disallow for 1 and 2 blue. And it lets me counter target spell, activated ability, or triggered ability. So, yeah. That's it. That's my Muldrotha the Gravetide Rats deck. Psh.